course it is. And so it's quite amazing when you look at what's really happening. And there's some oil drilling facts that you should know, that there are 27,000 abandoned oil wells in U.S. coastal waters, 3,500 oil rigs and platforms, 79 deep water drilling wells. And it's important to know that deep water drilling is, of course, a lot riskier than the kind of drilling we've been doing, more surface drilling. And we're having to do that because the oil is becoming scarce and because of our dependence on fossil fuel. So it is dependence on fossil fuel that's driving all of these things that are to a great extent connected to climate change. So you begin to see the whole connection. But the last one is what's really striking. We actually have 62 inspectors responsible for all U.S. oil wells. That adds up to 56 wells a year for each inspector. Do you think that's accurate? Each inspector is responsible to inspect 56 wells in 1 year. An impossible job. And of course, the accident that we just had basically shows that that's not working. This is the explosion. Just a picture so you can see. And of course, sometimes people forget that 11 workers were killed. And while that is really tragic, we have no idea how many more people are going to die because of this. You know, and people who end up with chronic illnesses, loss of wages and families, and it goes on and on because of this particular disaster. We had 200 million gallons of oil leaked into the Gulf before it was capped. And if you had been in New Orleans, I just started crying. I was at the hairdresser one day and we were all in there. And first, you know, when it happened, we were like, then they said, well, we're going to cap it. So the first day, did they cap it yet? No. Second day, did they cap it yet? You know, and as every day they said no, I was starting to feel more desperate. It's hard to describe that, but you begin to feel just more desperate, like they're killing us. You know, they're just killing us. You know, we had Katrina, now they're killing the Gulf, they're killing, you know, our way of life, our economy is sinking, and then we have people, you know, because we're such a conservative state and Louisiana is so tied to the oil industry, we have people saying, you know, no moratorium, which was insane, you know, but at the same time, some of them didn't have jobs, they felt they could go back to work, so you become, I wasn't, but they became very conflicted over what needed to be done in our state. And of course, the corporations are able to sell them. Because even though they're killing the Gulf and killing people, they can say, well, you know, this means more jobs. You know, the sooner we get back drilling, you know, the faster you can go back to work. And you say this to people with no income. That's how they've been able to basically control the vote to some extent and public opinion. We have 120 miles of United States coastlines contaminated. This is from this. Multi-billion-dollar fishing and tourism industries imperiled, with birds, sea turtles, dolphins, and other marine life killed, and Gulf ecosystem affected for years to come. You heard a lot about dispersants, maybe. That was a chemical sort of response to the disaster. I didn't really understand it, but then I began to think that dispersants, the use of dispersants was basically a public relations ploy, because it didn't get rid of the oil. It just kind of made it sink, you know, to the bottom so you don't see it. So it doesn't roll up on the shore. And as we began to talk more about the dispersants and how toxic it was and how it could affect, you know, marine life, I'm like, well, why did they do it? It would have been better to just clean it up. So now what we have are plumes of oil sort of floating around under the water. You know, what's on the bottom, and I forget they said about 6 feet of oil sitting at the bottom. And so from time to time it just pops up. So you get little puddles of oil now floating, and this will be going on for how long? You know, it's going to be a very long time. It would be better to me, I'm not the scientist in this, to let it roll up and remove it, right? But the public was becoming more and more enraged about seeing all of that stuff. So this is just public relations, you know. Put it down where people can't see it, and then we'll deal with it. And this is, BP was directing our governmental response to the disaster, which was extremely frustrating to all of us in the beginning. It was also frustrating to government employees, and I have to say that. All of the government employees who were there from EPA and NIHS that we know well were sitting around like this. You know, they knew they wanted to do something, but the legal, whatever it was, because this was an international corporation, the federal government was not on top of it, and based on some laws or whatever, they were claiming that they could. What was interesting to me was the way the work was divided up. The Coast Guard handled everything in the water. EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, could not come in and do anything until it hit land. So you got two agencies that aren't really talking to one another, all to some extent having to follow the rules of BP, an international company. So you're waiting, it's a disaster waiting to happen. And of course, that is exactly what's happening. There's been a cleanup, and most people like to call it a cover-up. The oil is covered up underwater, you know, and they've come up with all kinds of new rules for claims.